Minister, the question here regards the fact that in a lot of the restructures of distressed mortgages, the banks are actually making more money than they would have had the mortgage not been restructured. As an example, in the Finance Committee, we went through the Bank of Ireland restructures, and the Chief Executive of the bank admitted that in at least 90% and probably a lot more of the mortgages, the total amount being paid back by the borrowers was more. So term extensions, capitalisation of arrears, etc., leads to more. I think it's particularly pressing right now, Minister, with the courts getting filled up with orders of possession from the banks, that we're aware that in a lot of cases, the banks are actually making more money out of these mortgages than they would have had they been functioning normally. So my question is this something you agree shouldn't be happening, and as such, can we legislate accordingly?
Right, Minister, number 3.
I'd like to thank the Deputy for his question. The Consumer Protection Code and the Code of Conduct on Mortgage Arrears have in place a number of measures to protect financial consumers. On a general level, regulated lenders are required in their interaction with their customers to act honestly, fairly and professionally in the best interests of their customers. Utilising the mortgage arrears resolution process, there is a requirement on the lender to assess each case of mortgage difficulty on its own merits, and also to proactively work with the borrower in order to address a case of genuine mortgage difficulty. If a borrower is dissatisfied with the decision of the lender in this area, the appeals framework as set out in the CCMA will be available. Also, where appropriate, independent financial advice will be available to the borrower under the Protocol for Independent Advice to Borrowers available of long-term mortgage forbearance. Specific provision in the CCMA designed to protect borrowers in genuine mortgage difficulty include: 1. Except in very limited circumstances set out in the CCMA, a lender must not require a borrower, as part of an alternative repayment arrangement, to change from an existing tracker mortgage to another mortgage type. And B. Lenders are restricted from imposing charges and/or surcharges, interest or arrears arising on a relevant mortgage in arrears unless the borrower is not cooperating. While it is unfortunate that there are cases of mortgage difficulty and that this gives rise to certain difficulties and costs for the parties involved, it is nevertheless a very welcome development that many parties are in a position to agree and put in place sustainable alternative arrangements in order to address such a difficulty. The latest data from the Central Bank and my department indicates that an increasing number of mortgage restructures are being put in place in order to deal with mortgage difficulties, with almost 115,000 private dwelling accounts being classified as restructured at the end of December. It is also encouraging to note that 85% of such accounts are deemed to be meeting the terms of their current restructure arrangements. I will encourage lenders and borrowers in difficulty to continue to build on this and to reach acceptable and sustainable solutions to mortgage difficulty.
Thank you, Minister. The reply will appear in the official report. Deputy John Lay.
Thank you, Minister. Hopefully you'll agree that that answer that was scripted is boilerplate stuff. It doesn't address the question that I raised at all. The question I raise is this: the majority of restructures increase the level of profitability to the bank from the restructures. Not in all cases, but the Chief Executive of Bank of Ireland, just as an example, has admitted to the committee on the record that over 90% of Bank of Ireland restructures result in higher overall payments to the bank. So for a great many of these restructures, including the repossessions, the banks are making more money than had the loan been discharged. So what I want to ask you is, as a principle, let's ignore the CCMA, let's ignore all of that. As a principle, do you agree that in these cases, the banks shouldn't end up with a higher profit than had the loan been discharged normally? And if you agree with that, would you be open to exploring legislation with the committee to that effect?
Thank you. Minister.
Well, as I had another bit of a reply which I wasn't able to read out, so I'll read it for you now. In relation to the proposal suggested by the Deputy, I'm not convinced how workable a solution it may be, but it appears to be the case that many of the properties that banks are moving to repossess have been carrying arrears for some significant period of time and will be sold for a lower valuation than the original mortgage. Mortgage arrears is, however, an area which remains under continuous review. More and concerted action can be undertaken by the banks to assist customers in arrears, and as the Taoiseach has previously announced, my department is considering a range of options to support the existing framework and to improve the uptake of personal insolvency solutions.
Thank you, Deputy Stephen Donnelly.
Minister, maybe I could ask you to just stop reading out the prepared stuff from the civil servants, because it doesn't address the question I've asked, which is, do you, as Minister for Finance, believe that, as a principle, the banks should not be making additional profits on restructured mortgages? And if you agree with that as a principle, would you be open to working with the committee to draft legislation to that effect? This is something, Minister, that government TDs have raised. It's something that people within the banks have raised. It's a principle that says, look, the banking sector is partly responsible for what happened, and it should not be making excess profits on irresponsible lending. So they're making profits on the arrears, they're making profits on recapitalisation, they're making profits on term extensions, they're making additional profits over and above the expected net present value of the loans. And should we, as the elected representatives, be saying, actually, you know what, it is okay for you to make the money back that you would have made, but you cannot profit, you cannot make additional profits on the behaviour that caused all of this. Thank you.
Come on, Minister, to conclude.
Yeah, you see, I think it's a very narrow view of profitability that's being expressed by the Deputy. It seems to me that if a lending institution has a mortgage in arrears, that for the period of the arrears is losing a lot of money from the original contract position. And I'm not sure what you're saying about profits. It seems to me that restructuring should help both parties. It should help the borrower and it should help the lender. And it should arrive at a new position which is sustainable. But I can't see where the argument is arising that this leads to extra profits from the bank. I mean, unless you're arguing that when the mortgage is in arrears, that its saleable value is so low that only that should be realised by the bank, not the nominal value of the mortgage.
Thank you.